For those of you who don't know me, I'm Fran Rhodes. I'm on the Tea Party Board and Steering Committee, and it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers. Our first speaker tonight is Mr. Bob Kulick. Bob is an entrepreneur, a businessman, and an adventurer, and has had a very interesting life. But when he retired after selling a couple of different businesses, he landed in prison. Prison ministry, actually. His work as a board member for Center for Church Renewal, as well as Awana Lifeline Prison Ministry, now takes him into prisons around the country and even to foreign lands to help start Malachi Dad's programs for men and Hannah's Gift program for women. These programs work to break down the generational cycle of incarceration. Upon completion of the year-long program, the graduates are presented with one of Dr. Getz's Life Essential Study Bibles. The programs have proven to dramatically reduce recidivism rates while healing families. Today, in addition to his work on those boards, he also serves on the advisory board of Wingman Ministries, a men's ministry founded by former Dallas Cowboy Chad Hennings. He enjoys traveling with his wife of 36 years and watching their youngest daughter build up her career as an artist. He's got literature and books and things out in the front, and I'm sure you're going to want to check that out before you leave tonight. But please welcome Mr. Bob Kulick.
Thank you. That introduction was much better than how I usually introduce myself. I introduce myself as a retired pizza delivery guy who's now a board guy training to be an astronaut when I'm not in prison. It usually causes people to ask questions or back away real slowly. But yeah, the pizza delivery guy was one of the partners in CC's Pizza, the CC's Pizza restaurant chain. We also had a distribution company that distributed to all the restaurants, so I was a pizza delivery guy. And since then, I'm a board guy because I serve on the 3 ministry boards. And training to be, I'm actually Virgin Galactic future astronaut number 195. Hopefully, if Richard Branson gets it going, I'll be going to space, something I've always wanted to do within the next year or so. When I'm not in prison, and that's what I'm here to talk about today. To talk to you about the prison ministry that we do, and we're going to hear a lot about the prison reform that's going on in the state of Texas. One of the things I don't have to worry about is that this group is not a group that we have to worry about not being proud of being Americans, and especially being proud of being Texans. I'm going to give you some other reasons to be proud to be a Texan tonight, if you don't already have enough. But to start the whole program, to start the whole process, I have to take you back almost 20 years, actually a little bit over 20 years, to Angola Prison in Louisiana. This is the penitentiary for men in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. At that time, it was known as the bloodiest prison in the country. On average, they had a stabbing a day, a murder every 3 days, and a third of the prison population were sex slaves. A new warden came in there by the name of Burl Cain, and Burl looked at it and he goes, the only thing that's going to fix this is moral rehabilitation. The only thing that I know of that fixes morals is the Bible. And so he started working on that process. He started talking to the inmates and saying, why are you acting like this? What are you worried about? What are your fears, concerns? He found out that the thing that they were most concerned about, now remember, stabbing a day, a murder every 3 days, a third of the prison population of sex slaves, the thing that consistently came up with these inmates was, I don't want my children to follow me into prison. Typically, if you have a parent in prison, you're 70% more likely to end up in prison yourself. And so Burl Cain looked at this and he says, well, that's their fear. How do I start from that? He didn't know what to do. So the first thing he did, he knew that Awana, based out of the Chicago area, is involved with children's ministries. They start kids clubs and things like that in churches around the country, around the world. And so he called Awana and said, I've got these prisoners that are concerned about their children. What do I do? Can you help me? And so Awana Lifeline was born out of that. To give you an idea how Awana Lifeline has grown, 5 years ago, it started in Angola about 13 years ago. 5 years ago, we had 20 programs going on in 5 states. Today we have 368 programs in 30 states and 9 countries around the country. One of the things that is pretty amazing too, is you start talking about some of the other countries that it's in. Dominican Republic is one that really stands out. They liked the program so much, they saw what a difference it had in the inmates and in the recidivism rate. The typical recidivism within Dominican Republic is 86%. And they started the Malachi Dads program in there, started reconnecting these inmates with their kids, and their recidivism rate went from up in the upper 80s to 3%. And they looked at this and said, this is amazing. We need to do more of this. And so they actually, last year, passed a law that if you work in the prison system, whether you're a guard, you're a warden, whatever you do in the prison system, you must go through the Malachi Dads program yourself. So you understand it, you know how to teach it, and you can pass it on to the inmates. So a little sidetrack there, but when Burl Cain started this program, he could see what was happening to the inmates there as they got reconnected with their families. The fighting started to go down. All the problems within the prison started to drop dramatically. They then started working on the next step in the process, which they actually started a seminary down in Angola prison, where these inmates, most of them, and the average sentence in Angola prison is 92 years. Gives you an idea. That's the average sentence. Most of them are in there for life. So he started a seminary down there, and inmates that are long-term or life inmates can go through a full 4-year degree, get a degree, and then once they get that degree, they go out to the other prisons throughout Louisiana as field ministers, teaching the Malachi Dads program and teaching biblical principles and things like that. So started it there. A number of years ago, the great state of Texas decided this is working so well, we could do the same thing here. So several years, let's see, what's it been now? 6 years ago, I believe it is. The seminary in Darrington Prison, just south of Houston, started in Texas. How many of you know about the Darrington Seminary? Okay, a few of you. Most of you don't. It seems to be a very well-kept secret around the state. But there's the program there. Again, full 4-year seminary degree. Southwestern Theological Seminary professors teach the program down there. An inmate goes through a process, has to be approved to go into it. And again, it needs to be a long-term inmate or a life inmate. So he goes into a 4-year study program at Darrington Seminary, Darrington Prison / Seminary. Once he graduates, he goes out to the other prison in Texas. We now, as of last year, we have filled every maximum security prison with field ministers. We're now working on the medium security prisons and work our way through. I believe it'll take 8 years to get every prison in the state of Texas with field ministers in. I've talked to some of the wardens that have these, and they say it's absolutely amazing. The change that it makes in the whole culture of the prison is unbelievable. You've got, there's one warden that told me he had 26 dorms within his prison, and he said today, now after 3 years of having field ministers in there, 24 of those 26 dorms have prayer circles every night. He says when a bus shows up in front of the prison with new inmates in it, the field ministers are the first ones out there greeting the new inmates and saying, this is the way things work. I'm here to help you 24/7. I'm available to you at any time along the way. So these field ministers in there, part of their 4-year program is also to go through the Malachi Dads program. So they get a chance to learn it themselves, and then when they go into the prisons, they help facilitators, outside facilitators, to teach these classes. So when an inmate is learning the program, and typically facilitators will come in once a week, but they've got some homework to do in between those weekly meetings. So when the inmate has questions or is unsure about things, he can go to one of these field ministers and talk to him, be consulted by him. It really works out very well. The Malachi Dads program and the Hannah's Gift program for women, basically what the program does is take them through, the first book is kind of a step-by-step, what does it mean to be a Christian? So many of us were raised in church. I was raised in church, so I knew what sanctification meant. I knew what baptism meant. All the words that we throw around growing up in church, a lot of inmates have never heard before. So they look at that, they hear those things to somebody preaching to them and go, I don't even know what he's talking about. You know, I'm not going to stay here. So they walk out of the program. The Malachi Dad's program, the first book, starts that way, defining the terms that we all use as Christians so they understand what that's all about. It's also, when the first time I read through one of those books, I read it and I was thinking, this is so simplistic. And then I realized, typical inmate around the country reads on 4th grade level. So these books are to a point where they're very easy for any of us to read, easy for most inmates to read too, because it's on a 4th grade level. Of course, there are all levels of it, but that's the average throughout the system. So that's the first book. Next 2 books are based off of Dr. Gene Getz, whose board I also serve on. His book that he wrote back in the 1970s, never been out of print, called The Measure of a Man. It talks about the principles of what it means to be an ethical, biblical-based man. So the next 2 books takes them through that process. The last book in the program is Family Reconciliation. How do you come back into the kid, bring the kids back in, even if you've got a life sentence? How do you reconnect with those kids, and how do you be a father or a mother to those children, even from behind bars? One of my favorite stories about this, there's a guy by the name of Darren Hutchinson down in Angola prison. He goes by Hutch. He told us the story. He went through the Malachi Dad's program, learned all the processes. He had been totally disconnected from his daughter for 14 years, totally estranged from her, hadn't talked to her. He went through the program, and he started reaching out to her, started making phone calls to her, started writing to her. Bit by bit, they got back together. They started talking to each other. She came to visit. She saw the change that had been made in her father. As time went on, their relationship got closer and closer. She eventually ended up getting married and had a little baby boy, and named that boy Malachi as a way of honoring what the program did to her dad and changing. I'm sorry, I get goosebumps every time I tell that story. It's one of those things that when you hear it coming from this guy who had been totally disconnected, and he has a life sentence in Angola prison. He'll never get out of there, but he's a great father. I tell people, some of the best fathers that I've met are inmates in prisons around the country. I had the chance to go to the first federal prison that we started the program in about 1.5 years ago and graduate a bunch of guys out of the prison up in Rochester, Minnesota. It's the federal medical prison. Guys there were 2 guys that I met up there that were gang leaders. One was a gang leader down in, from Rochester's down, but up in Detroit. And another one was the leader of the largest street gang in Chicago, the Black Disciples. They've both gone through the Malachi Dad's program. Another guy that was in the prison, he had reached out to me and said, I really, after going through this, I've really gotten encouraged, I've gotten a calling to go to seminary. I really want to go to seminary. Can you help me with this? And so I was actually down, I called a number of seminaries, and everybody said, no, we don't do correspondence courses, can't do that, can't work on it. I was down in Angola prison, actually graduating 125 guys from the Malachi Dad's program down there. And that night, we were having dinner. I was sitting next to the chaplain of Angola prison, and we were talking about a variety of different things. And in the course of it, I said, by the way, I've got this guy in federal prison that wants to go to seminary. Can you help me in any way? And he goes, oh, sure. He pulls out a pen and paper and writes down a name and phone number and slides it over to me. He says, call him. I said, well, does he know you? Can I use your name? And he goes, oh, better than that. He reaches for his phone, calls this guy and says, hey, I'm sitting here having dinner with a guy. He's got a guy in prison that wants to go to seminary. Here, talk to him. And he hands me the phone. So I start talking to him. He heads up a seminary up in the Chicago area. And as I explained to him what I want, he says, it's so funny. He says, our last staff meeting, we decided that we wanted to do prison ministry as an outreach, but we had no idea how to start. And he says, all of a sudden I get a phone call saying, hey, can you start this program for us? So this guy, James Stone, was the guy who started it, started the seminary program up there. And I went up to visit him and a couple other guys up in Rochester. And one of the guys took me out to the yard to meet Royal. This is the guy that ran the gang down over in Detroit. And came up to him and he said, hey, Bob's got this seminary program that James has started. He said, would you be interested in starting it? And Royal goes, well, yeah, I guess so. And I thought, that's kind of strange. And next day, he sends me an email and says, I'm so sorry about my reaction to that. But he said, I've been getting this calling that I should go to seminary. And he said, I thought, how ridiculous. I'm a felon, I'm in prison, nobody's going to want to help me out with this thing. There's no way I can do it. He says, I made the decision I was going to be a truck driver and work on that. And then all of a sudden you come walking up and say, hey, you want to go to seminary? So he is now in seminary, he's in his 3rd year. The guy who was ran the Black Disciple Street Gang in Chicago, he's now in his 3rd year of seminary. Last time I saw him, he came up to me. This guy is a guy that if you saw him walking down the street, you'd change to the other side of the street. Big guy, dreadlocks, and he came up to me in the prison and grabbed my hands with both of his hands and said, Bob, thank you so much for what you're doing. He says, when I get out, I want to be a leader again. I just want to be a different type of leader this time. Those are the type of lives that are being changed through the Malachi Dad's program, through the Hannah's Gift program. I tell stories about the women too that go on and on. It's been a fantastic program. It's something I never thought that I would be involved in. When I retired, when I sold the company and retired, I had a stack of books I was going to read. I was going to ride my motorcycle around the perimeter of the country and write a book about it. I've got it outlined, I've got it buried somewhere, but I'm spending more time doing this than I was when I was working. Finally, the last thing I want to say is when we, after we graduate classes from the Malachi Dad's or the Hannah's Gift program, we do go in there, and Dr. Gene Getz has recently written a study Bible. I've got one out there. I've got a couple of them out there if you take a look at it if you'd like. It's the first multimedia study Bible. So there's actually 1,500 life lessons embedded in the text of the Bible. People actually use it as a seminary course. There's a school set up in Uganda to use that as a seminary course for pastors who don't have access to seminaries. But we present them with a $70 leather-bound Bible when they graduate from the Malachi Dad's and Hannah's Gift program. And in a lot of cases, this is the first time in their lives that they've walked across the stage to the applause of people in a room and receive a diploma for something they've accomplished. So thank you very much for the time. I really appreciate it. If I've got a table out there, I'd love to talk to you. We've got a number of people here. I know Kirby's one. There's several others that go into prisons and do prison ministry. Talk to any of them. Talk to me. Would love to have you come to prison. It only takes one. I tell people, so many people are afraid to come. I tell them, come with me once. If you don't want to go again, I'll never talk to you about it again. But 9 times out of 10, people walk out of prison, the first thing they say is, when can I come back again? There are a couple of questions. Do we have time for?
Sure.
Yes.
I can't understand. What is the name of the program? Malachi?
Malachi Dad's is the program for the men.
Malachi Dad's?
Dad's. Yeah, Malachi Dad's.
Okay.
So it's based off the last line, Malachi 4:6. It says he'll return the hearts of the fathers to their children and children to their fathers. And then Hannah's Gift program is basically the same thing, talking about Hannah and her son. Very good. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.